Good evening. I'm Rajiv Handa. On behalf of Venus Remedies, I feel privileged to extend my warm welcome to all the critical care specialists, nephrologists, internists, microbiologists, and other specialty doctors attending today this webinar on drug-induced kidney injury in critically ill. Now, firstly, I would like to invite our CEO, Venus Medicine Research Center and President, Global Critical Care and Strategic Board Advisor, Shri Saransh Chaudhary sir, to share a few words about our institute, Venus Medicine Research Center.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of VMRC, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on drug-induced kidney injury. For those of you who are not familiar with Venus Medicine Research Center or VMRC, please allow me to give you a brief introduction. VMRC is the research wing of Venus Remedies Limited and was set up in 2004 with the aim to find innovative solutions to the challenge of AMR. Since our inception, we have worked on a multitude of approaches, including BLBLI combinations, antibiotic resistance breakers, novel drug delivery techniques, and novel formulation techniques with the singular aim of addressing the unmet medical need of AMR. With the state-of-the-art research facility, VMRC was among the first in India to be accredited by DSIR, obtain GLP accreditations for multiple preclinical labs, and a CPSCA-approved animal house. Over the years, we have added super specialty labs to advance our understanding of bacterial infectious diseases like hollow fiber infection models and, for the first time in India, organ-in-chip models. In particular, the kidney-in-a-chip model radically changes the way we traditionally screen for drug toxicity and has enabled us to understand the mechanisms leading to kidney damage in humans and consequently enhanced our ability to find better solutions for the patients and the caregivers. We have always viewed AMR as a huge public health crisis that needs to be dealt with on an immediate basis and at all levels of the healthcare setup. Dose-limiting drug toxicity associated with key last-line antibiotics present with a particular challenge and limit the effectiveness of these drugs in treating life-threatening infections. I do sincerely hope that we can draw attention to and learn from the best practices shared by an expert panel who have also curated this webinar session. Before I leave, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the doctors, the healthcare workers, paramedics, and all support staff who have worked tirelessly over the past year and given their all in the fight against COVID-19. Please accept my heartfelt gratitude. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Rajiv Handa to initiate the proceedings for the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll go ahead with our second speaker, Dr. Shruti Tapiawala. Ma'am will be sharing her views on clinical implications of drug-induced kidney injury. Dr. Shruti Tapiawala, ma'am, is a consultant nephrology in Sir H.N. Reliance Hospital and Global Hospitals, Mumbai. Ma'am did her MD from BYL Nair Hospital and TN Medical College and trained for nephrology and renal transplant in PD Hinduja National Hospital, Mumbai, and completed her DRP. Ma'am had membership of American Society of Transplantation, Canadian Society of Transplantation, International Society of Peritoneal Dialysis, and Indian Society of Nephrology. Ma'am has more than 22 years of experience in leading institutions like Global Hospitals, Kokilabhen Dhirubhai Ambani Hospitals, and Research Center, Mumbai. So over to you, ma'am, for the next presentation.
Thank you. I would like to say that this is an extremely needed session for today's world. We are using antibiotics left, right, and center. Me as a kidney specialist, and I'm sure the panelists realize the importance of this field, that acute kidney injury is taking away at least 40 to 50% of our practice, because whenever we enter the ICU, seeing the use of antibiotics, that this was there and this is done. This is extremely important. Let me straight away delve into the topic. So let's straight away go into the case. 82-year-old lady, resident of New Delhi, non-diabetic, non-hypertensive, a Parkinson's patient, underwent a total knee replacement at a hospital in New Delhi in 2017. She recovered very well from the surgery. During the physio, she had some quadriceps muscle rupture. Her mobility was reduced and she had to wear diapers to avoid the pain. She developed a symptom with Klebsiella during December 2017. She was Jan 2018, again, she was noted to have a decreased appetite, pedal edema, increased drowsiness over 2 weeks. She presented to a physician, and this kept small treatments for urinary tract infection were going on. She was visiting Mumbai and she again had a problem. Investigations were done. Her hemoglobin was low. Her WBC count was high. She had a blood urea nitrogen of 86 and a creat of 4.2, whereas the baseline noted was 1. Potassium was 6.2. Her urine was suggestive of pyuria and the sonography essentially showed a normal kidney. This all told us that this is an acute kidney injury. Additional information, as I told you, the baseline creatinine was normal. Medication history taken by us. As per the orthopedic surgeon, there were supplements given for vitamin D3, vitamin C, iron supplements and calcium. Antibiotics were given in form of ciprofloxacin, amikacin. So this lady has intermittently received antibiotics, some oral, some IV, some injectable. Why amikacin was given to an elderly lady? Because intermittent urinary tract infection, one shot here and there. Antihypertensive, she was on telmisartan, which is an angiotensin receptor blocker. She was on anti-Parkinsonian drugs, Syndopa, Mirtaz, and pain control was with eterocoxib. Now this she was on for 2 months. Imagine a surgery done in 2017 and she continued to be on painkillers despite recovery because she was scared of the pain, and because of the quadriceps rupture, she continued to be on pain medications and she continued to have recurrent urinary tract infections with intermittent antibiotics. So we had 3 medical issues at hand. One was severe renal dysfunction, which was an acute kidney injury. There was severe hyperkalemia and there was a urinary tract infection. So when we saw the patient, we put down in this way that there's an acute kidney injury secondary to urinary tract infection, probably also because of eticoxib, and amikacin was added to the list. So she was on 2 nephrotoxic drugs, namely a COX-2 inhibitor and an aminoglycoside. She had hyperkalemia secondary to diet, that was one. But she was also on COX-2 inhibitors, which could cause hyperkalemia. She was on ARB, telmisartan. That also will lead to hyperkalemia. Plus, an acute kidney injury will itself lead to hyperkalemia. She had a urinary tract infection. This was probably because of diapers, incomplete voiding, and probable bladder dysfunction which she had. So this highlights to us that, patients or people are so fragile that, a small illness can push you towards a serious illness like an acute kidney injury. This patient was on a concoction of drugs, multiple antibiotics given intermittently, on multiple nephrotoxic medications together. A lesson to learn, that look at the patient as a whole rather than looking at one problem and treating it. So now let me delve into acute kidney injury. We'll define it. We'll see what epidemiology, we'll see what impact it has. I'll just try to see how the drugs are causing the kidney injury. How do we dose them when we see elderly individuals, when we see kidney failures in critical care, and how do we prevent it? How do we identify the at-risk people? So acute kidney injury has now been a term which has replaced renal failure. Failure was a very morbid term. So internationally, this has been replaced by injury. An universal definition and staging system was proposed and it is followed. I will show the staging system in some time. But for a basic, acute kidney injury is a syndrome which will be characterized by a certain decrease in the GFR, maybe hours to days, retention of nitrogenous wastes, disturbance in the extracellular fluid volume, electrolyte, base, and hemostasis. So estimates of AKI, like Dr. Bandyal also said, that AKI prevalence ranges between less than 1% at places to 66%. These variations can be explained by not only the population differences, but also inconsistent use of standardized AKI classification criteria. So all over the world, there have been evolving definitions, and everyone will label AKI based on their terms and conditions. High-income countries show a lower incidence of AKI than do lower to middle-income countries, because you have a lot of tropical infections in the lower-income countries. These are all in the areas where you get tropical infections, you get AKIs because of that, hence the discrepancy. The syndrome is associated with considerable morbidity and mortality, and that is to be seen and how we can prevent it. Delay in the recognition and suboptimal care of patients in AKI will impede their recovery and lead to a higher mortality, and of course, not to mention kidney failures. So highlighting the unmet needs for improved detection and diagnosis are the need of the hour. So it induces a generalized inflammatory response that affects distant organs. We know that when you enter the critical care, as doctors, when we enter critical care and we see that, cardiologists have always told me that, when I come to see a patient and I see you standing there, I know this patient is in trouble. So that means that when a patient gets into an acute kidney injury, it is already that the patient is in a surge response and there's a generalized inflammatory response. A full recovery of kidney function is very uncommon. An episode of AKI can lead to development of CKD or end-stage kidney disease, and the incidence changes over years. The impact on long-term costs is far greater than what we still understand. Now, if you look at the hospitalized patients and you look at the critical care patients, of course, when you see non-ICU in-ward patients, you will find that the rate of AKI is a little less than 1 in 5 patients. Renal replacement therapy will be less than 10%, and the mortality is 10 to 20%, which is also not low. In critically ill patients in adults, you will see 1 in 3 patients having acute kidney injury, out of which 5 to 11% will require renal replacement therapy. And the mortality is high and it is not recorded. Pediatric patients, 1 in 4 with a renal replacement therapy required in 1 to 2%. Cardiac surgery, surprisingly, it is more because obviously they must be using contrast, they are on bypass machines, and they have a lot of hemodynamic compromises. Patients with sepsis, obviously the rates will go up. It is because these patients have a lot of inflammation going on and they require a lot of renal replacement therapy, almost up to the tune of 15%. Now, what are the common drugs which you would relate to AKI and which we all should be careful when we are seeing patients? We should try to see whether 2 drugs are not compounding to a problem. So if you have antibiotics, antifungals, antivirals going on, analgesics, immunosuppression like calcineurin inhibitors. So for example, solid organ transplant patients, bone marrow transplant patients will have multiple immunosuppressants. They will have antibiotics, they will have antivirals. So when we have a combination of these drugs, we should be careful that we are not affecting the kidney and hence having complications because of that. Antihypertensives like ACE inhibitors, ARBs, along with these can add to the hyperkalemia and acidosis. Contrast agents, when the patients are admitted to the ICU, when the patients are admitted to the hospital, we should be very careful. So I always tell people that when in doubt, call us. We will try to help you out because, seemingly the creatinine may be 1, you're going for a contrast, patient is on an ARB, patient is on a diuretic, and a contrast is given. And then we will be told, oh, the creatinine was normal, we didn't think something bad would happen, we didn't think the creatinine will go up, but you are adding a 3rd nephrotoxic. So we should be careful when we see such patients. Drug categories which will predispose you, like I said, diuretics, antihypertensive agents, because if you have a hypotension, you are on diuretics, you are dehydrated, you will get an increased risk of acute kidney injury. What are the conditions where you have a reduced cardiac output? Because these are going to decompensate the kidneys when there is a septic shock, congestive heart failure, there's a myocardial infarction or hypotension for any reason. And if you have a patient who has an intravascular hemorrhage or dehydration or GI fluid losses, and this is the time when you add an ACE inhibitor or an ARB, or you give a nephrotoxic antibiotic, you should be careful that the volume is managed. You should be careful that there are no toxic drugs which are adding to each other. Very important. So these drug-induced injury will cause at least 20 to 40% of acute kidney injuries. So drugs are very important culprits. We have weapons in our hand, but they are double-edged swords. We have to be careful. perhaps as high as 60% in elderly, and significant amount of medications and metabolites are excreted in the urine. Side effects including nephrotoxicity and drug interactions are very common when high concentrations are achieved. I have very often seen that when infectious disease specialists are also involved, critical care people are involved, there is a multidisciplinary care going on. But we always keep discussing. The ID people will tell us we need high concentrations. The critical care will say, I want the patient dry. The kidney people will say, oh, don't harm my kidney. So, you have to achieve a balance when a patient is very sick. Antimicrobials represent one of the largest group of medicines where we see impaired kidney function. And the most common ways of injury are interstitial nephritis, tubular damage. Sometimes antivirals are also causing crystal depositions, immune dysregulation. We have seen all this in detail in the previous speaker's slides. Now, if you see colistin, aminoglycosides, vancomycin, trimethoprim, sulfomethoxazole, which is Septran, which is still very commonly used in our solid organ transplant patients. And now, because all the bacteria are becoming resistant to the normal antimicrobials, Septran is come into play. IV Septran is being used, Stenotrophomonas is seen, sometimes Elizabeth kinga is seen. All these bacteria require antibiotics which are nephrotoxic. Penicillin combinations, clindamycin, cephalosporins. Daptomycin, macrolides, linezolid, carbapenems, metronidazole, although these are very small, but they still potentially have the capacity to harm. If you see colistin associated acute kidney injury, now colistin is very commonly being used, and the hospitals which do not have an antibiotic stewardship, it becomes very difficult to control the use of these antibiotics. And it is seen that, the incidence of AKI is around 51% in the colistin group versus 22% in the matched controls where colistin is not given. So we should be very careful when we use the higher antibiotics, because these are going to, and potentially colistin has a neurotoxic effect also. So we should be very careful. Aminoglycosides in elderly, like in the patient I was talking about, the patient was not in shock, but the patient got an acute kidney injury. Yes, we have to use it, but we have to use it carefully. Now, this patient would not have landed up in an amikacin-induced acute kidney injury if the patient was not on a painkiller like COX-2 inhibitors or on ARBs. If it was only aminoglycoside, she would have still made it and escaped the acute kidney injury. So it is seen with aminoglycosides that, you can, in situation of shock, 33% of AKI. If you have a higher stage of AKI, 92% will be the situation, and 50% of dialysis patients. When you have no shock, amino acid includes AKI is only 14%. So we still as nephrologists use aminoglycosides, but we use it judiciously. As we are nephrologists, painkillers and aminoglycosides, these are the two types of medicines if we use, we tell them we are prescribing it and please dose it as we are saying. Now, other drugs, these are antivirals. They can cause acute kidney injury by intratubular crystallization, and enough hydration is good to prevent a tubular injury. Interferons will directly cause a tubular cytotoxicity. This we have already seen in the previous speaker's slide, so I would not want to reiterate to that, but mainly we have to understand that these antibiotics are affecting our tubules, they are affecting the excretion, and they are affecting the balance. So if you see thrombotic microangiopathy, Fanconi syndrome, electrolyte wasting disturbances, myoglobulin induced tubulopathy, these are the different types of combinations which we see with the antibiotics. And it is very interesting that if every time you use an antibiotic and you get an acute kidney injury, if you try to evaluate, you will find all the etiologies being highlighted. So what are the risk factors for someone to get a drug-induced injury? How will you know that this patient will have a drug-induced injury and we should be careful? So if you have an elderly patient, now today the definition of elderly has changed, but you can safely say more than 70 years of age, you should be careful and trying to see if there are any other comorbidities. if you have a patient with diabetes, you have a chronic kidney disease at hand, you have an ischemic heart disease with a low ejection fraction, you have ACE inhibitors, ARBs, you have diuretics on board, dehydration. See, sometimes we see patients who are on diuretics because they have a low ejection fraction. But when you screen the IVC, you actually see that they are dehydrated. So first and foremost, I would say practical. See the patient, volume evaluation, remove whatever medicines you don't need. That is the first thing I do. I want to cut down on whatever medicines I do not need at that point of time. And believe me, that is what works most of the times. The simplest thing to do. If a person is going to get a contrast for a CT scan, prepare the patient. If it's a life-threatening emergency, we do not have time, no choice. If you have a choice, wait for a day, hydrate the patient. See that all the nephrotoxic drugs are removed. I'm not a fan of N-acetylcysteine, but hydration is what works. So next question is, you want to dose an antibiotic, you have an AKI and you are asked that, oh, we want to give XYZ drug, doctor, we want a dose from you. So when you have a dose, I still see the intensive care registrars and the personnel in the ICU use the Cockcroft-Gault formula. They tell me that today the creatinine is 3, yesterday the patient was dialyzed, urine output nahi hai, lekin the eGFR is coming out to 40. Now this is the most stupid thing I can see in the ICU because there is no urine output, the GFR is 0 and the person is calculating the eGFR based on the creatinine. Umpteen number of times I try to explain to them that look at the urine. The proof of the pudding that the kidney is working is the urine. You have no urine, your GFR is 0. So that is why I repeat that we cannot use creatinine as a marker of the GFR in the situation of an acute kidney injury or when the patient is dialysis bound. So we should now understand how do we dose antibiotics if we cannot use a Cockcroft-Gault formula. So for a CKD patient, we know that we can get a GFR. For a stable CKD, I will dose the antibiotics according to that. But for an acute kidney injury, you need a different staging. You need a different calculation. And the lessons to learn, we cannot stage an AKI based on the creatinine like a CKD and cannot dose antibiotics based on creatinine. So then comes the criteria to define an acute kidney injury and to understand the stages and to understand the severity of the acute kidney injury. So there are 3. There is a Reifel criteria, there is an Akin criteria, and there is a KDIGO criteria. So now we have to see what are the pluses and minuses of each of these. So the Reifel criteria is defined as risk, injury, failure, loss, and ESKD. And this is incorporating increased creatinine and urine output. So you have an increased creatinine or a decrease in the GFR and a decrease in the urine output defined as 5 ml per kg per hour and less for 6 hours. If you have more than 50% decrease in the GFR with a urine output which is less for more than 12 hours, you go in the phase of injury. So you have to see that most of your patients are in the risk criteria and you don't allow them to progress further. That is very important. The next stage is that you have an increase which is beyond repair and you are in the failure stage where you are anuric for more than 12 hours. Then you have a loss which is a persistent acute kidney injury and complete loss of kidney function for more than 4 weeks. And then it leads to ESKD. So these definitions and the staging are important for us to see that the stage of acute kidney injury doesn't progress. If possible, you try to bring the level to a higher level rather than a lower level. Now, there are limitations of each and every staging. So you have to see the patient and not blindly apply the criteria or the reports to the patient. Nowadays, what does a junior doctor do? They are sitting at the computer, seeing the reports, seeing the vitals and reporting to us. Bedside care has become nil. So it's very important to understand that how many hours the urine output has gone down. Even before the creatinine goes up, you have to identify that this is a patient at risk. Here we have to back off. Here we have to see that we involve a nephrologist and try to get things sorted out. Get a middle level so that diuresis is achieved, electrolytes are balanced, you don't end up the kidney into an injury phase. Sometimes with rifle criteria, you have problems where you have developed an AKI and serum creat and urine output criteria are not being managed. Sometimes there's a more than 50% increase because there's a myoglobalinuria or rhabdomyolysis and you cannot stage it properly. So every criteria have to be applied with a pinch of salt. Now the Akin criteria. These came back in 2007 where the definition of AKI was an abrupt increase in the serum creatinine by 0.3 milligram per dl over the baseline within 48 hours or 50% or greater increase in the creatinine within 7 days or a urine output which was less. So it made it a little simpler, but again, this said within 48 hours. 48 hours is too much. You can really get a renal injury which is not reversible. So you need something to be picked up even before that. So here, that was the missing link, that Akin did not allow identification of AKI when the serum creatinine elevation in a time frame higher than 40. Second, stage 3 of Akin classification included 3 diagnostic criteria: creat, urine output, and renal replacement therapy. Now, if you ask me, I will not want to start renal replacement therapy on a person unless and until I feel that it is an emergency, because subjecting someone to a dialysis is increasing the inflammatory load. So that is why the RRT requirement criteria will derange everything, because everyone will have a different criteria for initiating dialysis. Then came the KDIGO classification, which is now used as the best of the classifications, where you have an increase in the creatinine of more than 0.3 milligram per dl. You have an increase of more than 1.5 above the baseline, known and assumed to have happened within 7 days, and less than 0.5 ml per kilo per hour for 6 hours. That will be the diagnostic criteria. Then you have the staging of 1, 2, and 3 based on the severity of the rise and the severity of decrease in the urine output. Now, we have seen the definitions, we have seen what causes the acute kidney injury. Now, we should know how it impacts. Very important, because if you have only an ischemic heart disease, or you have only a paralysis, or you only have a septic shock, but you do not have a kidney involvement, mortality is not very high. The moment the kidney gets affected, your mortality shoots up. So if you see in consecutive series, there are many series which are showing that there is a very high mortality the moment people get AKI. Modest increase in the serum creatinines are associated with mortality, and the cost of stay, the length of stay in the hospitals, even after adjustments of age or gender. So it is nothing to do with your age, it is nothing to do with your gender. The moment you have an AKI, the length of stay in the hospital rises, your short-term and long-term mortality rises, and you have to see that it will impair a lot of things around. So if you look at the long-term mortality, the moment you require renal replacement therapy, your rate of survival drops to 20% at 5 years. And when you do not have a renal replacement therapy, or patients without renal replacement therapy, your survival is 62%. So see, AKI is increasing the mortality, but if you have a severe enough AKI which is landing you up on a renal replacement therapy, even temporarily, your mortality still goes up. And this has been noted, like if I tell you 15-20 years back, we would say, oh, AKI, nothing wrong, he will improve, then forget about it. But now, in the last 5 to 10 years, literature has been coming up that every time the kidney gets damaged, the life is at risk. Every time there is a damage, nephrons are dying. And that is leading to more inflammation in the system, more metabolic derangements, and an increased mortality. Now, AKI in patients who have survived hospitalization, the long-term mortality rate is still 9% per 100 person years. Non-AKI controls in comparison is only 4.3%. So, the kidney has a lot of control on the inflammation and metabolism of your body, and something will get deranged when this is not working. Again, the higher the stage of acute kidney injury, the higher the hazard ratio, which is a no-brainer at this point of time. Now, the last point I would like to raise is the risk of chronic kidney disease. We all get scared when someone is labeled as a chronic kidney disease, but we have to understand that acute kidney injury, every time you damage the kidney, nephrons are dying. There's an interplay and a complex association between AKI and long-term deterioration of renal function. So meta-analysis, 13 studies are showing that you have a strong association between acute kidney injury and the development of CKD and end-stage kidney disease. So this is a very big eye-opener that do not disregard acute kidney injury. So if you have a healthy kidney, you have a residual renal function, you have a repair capacity. But when you have a kidney injury, your repair capacity and the compensation mechanism is lost. The autoregulatory mechanisms are lost. And every time there's an AKI, you're going to hyperfiltrate, you are going to get a damage, you're going to get a scarred kidney. And over long term, these kidneys are going to land up in CKDs. Patients may not realize this. But that is why when we discharge acute kidney injury patients, we tell them that your creatinine has come down to 0.8, but do follow up every 3 months to understand whether there is any implication happening, whether there is any CKD happening. This is very important because every acute kidney injury has left a mark behind. So again, to reiterate, because these are important things, that we should always be careful that when a person is having an acute kidney injury, you look at the risk factors for a chronic kidney disease. Look at elderly people, look at lower baseline renal function if they already have. So don't look at a creatinine of 0.8. 0.8 may not mean a normal function for XYZ elderly person. So we should look at things in a perspective of the patient. Diabetes, hypertension, they already have hyperfiltration going on. Chronic heart failures, people on sacubitril, valsartan combinations, people on ACE inhibitors, ARBs and diuretics, people with low serum albumins, proteinuria, liver failure, recurrent episodes of UTI, Charleston index, which is higher. So all these situations are going to predispose a person to acute kidney injury. So every time we see such a patient, we should try to remove medications which are going to add to an acute kidney injury. So to summarize, AKI is a very common phenomenon in hospital and OPD patients, especially with multiple comorbidities and medications. It increases the risk of long-term CKD and ESKD. AKI increases the immediate and long-term mortality, and prevention with judicious use and correct use of antimicrobials along with preventive care of AKI should be instituted for all at-risk patients. Thank you. I will end over there.